Do you think Jack and the Beanstalk is just a children's bedtime story? A simple fairy tale about a boy, some magic beans, and a giant? What if I told you that beneath this seemingly innocent fable lies a dark history, one deliberately obscured for centuries by those who feared its implications? What follows is the result of 15 years of research into sealed archives, forgotten historical documents, and the testimonies of those who dared to speak out. The truth behind Jack and the Beanstalk is far more terrifying than anything you were told as a child. The story begins not with Jack, but with an anomalous botanical discovery in the remote village of Heddleton, England, in 1487. Parish records from St. Mary's Church document a peculiar incident involving a local farmer, Thomas Greeley, who reported the overnight growth of an impossible vine that ascended beyond sight into the heavens. The records, kept by Father William Holbrook, describe how the vine grew with such vigor as to make sounds like the stretching of great ropes and bore leaves the size of cartwheels. The church dismissed it as peasant superstition. The vine was cut down and burned within days. Thomas Greeley and his family disappeared shortly thereafter. The official record states they relocated to a neighboring village after selling their property. No evidence of their arrival elsewhere exists. Their names simply vanish from all historical documentation. What makes this account particularly unsettling is that similar incidents were recorded throughout the region over the next century. In 1512, another heaven-reaching vine appeared in Dorsham, less than 30 miles from Heddleton. In 1539, 3 such growths were reported in Willowsby. In 1547, a cluster of 5 emerged simultaneously in Farnwell. Each incident followed the same pattern: rapid overnight growth, immediate removal by authorities, and the subsequent disappearance of witnesses. The Tudor government, under Henry VIII and later Elizabeth I, issued a series of now declassified edicts forbidding discussion of these botanical anomalies. A royal decree dated June 1554 commanded that all tales of unnatural growths that pierce the sky be struck from record and memory upon pain of imprisonment. This systematic suppression continued for generations. But what truly connects these incidents to our familiar fairy tale? The answer lies in a little-known manuscript discovered in the private collection of Sir Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth I's spy master, after his death in 1590. The document, written in coded language and only partially deciphered in 1978, contains the first known reference to what would later become Jack and the Beanstalk. It describes not a fictional tale, but an investigation into the troubling matter of the great stalks and what dwells above them. Walsingham's agents reported a disturbing consistency in witness testimonies. Those who climbed the mysterious vines, and there were several documented attempts, described reaching a land in the clouds inhabited by beings of extraordinary stature and strength. None who ventured beyond this initial observation ever returned. The manuscript contains detailed sketches of these cloud realms based on telescope observations, showing structures of impossible scale that vanished along with the vines when they were destroyed. The most unsettling aspect of Walsingham's investigation was the discovery that these events were not random. They followed a precise 40-year cycle that aligned with specific astronomical configurations. The document concludes with Walsingham's chilling assessment: these are not mere botanical curiosities, but gateways deliberately opened from the other side. This pattern of appearing and disappearing beanstalks continued through the 17th century, though records become increasingly fragmented due to civil war and political upheaval. What emerges clearly is that by the early 1700s, the authorities had adopted a new strategy. Rather than attempting to suppress all knowledge of the incidents, they began promoting a fictionalized version, a harmless children's tale about a boy named Jack who climbed a magical beanstalk and outwitted a single giant. The earliest printed version of Jack and the Beanstalk appeared in 1734, published anonymously, but now traced to a printing press with direct connections to government offices. The timing is significant, as it corresponds precisely with the predicted 40-year cycle of appearances. Parish records from that same year document 7 separate incidents of impossibly tall growths across southern England. The strategy proved effective. Within a generation, the real events had been subsumed by fiction. Reports of new appearances were dismissed as imagination influenced by the popular tale. The truth was hidden in plain sight, transformed into entertainment for children. But the cycle continued, regardless of whether anyone believed. The pattern next peaked in 1774, then 1814, then 1854. With each occurrence, fewer people recognized what was really happening. Those who did were increasingly isolated, their concerns dismissed as delusion or superstition. A breakthrough in understanding came in 1894 during that year's cycle. Lord Edmund Blackwood, a respected botanist and member of the Royal Society, happened to be present in Devon when 3 beanstalks appeared simultaneously near the village of Woolsey. Unlike previous witnesses, Blackwood approached the phenomenon with scientific rigor, collecting samples and making detailed observations before local authorities arrived to destroy the growths. Blackwood's private journals, only discovered in 1967 when his estate was converted into a museum, contain meticulous documentation of his findings. The plants, he wrote, were wholly unknown to botanical science, with cellular structures unlike any terrestrial vegetation. More disturbing was his observation that the vines appeared to be semi-sentient, responding to human proximity by subtly altering their growth patterns to facilitate climbing. Blackwood managed to ascend one of the stalks to a height he estimated at nearly 1 mile before being forced back by respiratory difficulty. In his journal, he described glimpsing structures of impossible dimensions floating among the clouds and movement of entities too large to be properly comprehended. Most significantly, he reported hearing rhythmic vibrations that he initially attributed to wind but later concluded were deliberate communication, a summoning. Upon his return to ground level, Blackwood found himself surrounded by government agents who confiscated his samples and notes. His official journals make no mention of the incident. Only his private diary, hidden in a concealed compartment in his desk, preserved the account. The entry concludes with a haunting observation. "They are farming us. The tale has it backwards. We are not the jack in this story. We are the golden eggs." Blackwood died 3 weeks later of what was officially recorded as respiratory failure. His family reported that in his final days, he complained of being watched from above and claimed to hear giant footsteps at night. Medical records indicate he was treated for acute paranoia and delusion before his death. The 20th century brought new technologies and new opportunities to document the phenomenon. During the 1934 cycle, a British documentary filmmaker named Arthur Holloway captured the first known footage of a beanstalk near Brighton. The film, running just under 4 minutes, shows a massive green stalk approximately 10 feet in diameter rising into the mist. The footage abruptly ends as Holloway begins to climb. 3 days later, Holloway's camera was discovered at the base of where the stalk had been. The film had been exposed to light, destroying any additional footage. Holloway himself was never found. Government agents confiscated the surviving footage, which remained classified until 1998, when a Freedom of Information request finally made it public. Analysis by modern experts has confirmed the footage shows no signs of manipulation or special effects. The 1974 cycle coincided with increased government surveillance capabilities. Declassified CIA documents reveal that multiple intelligence agencies monitored the appearances, which now extended beyond England to sites in North America, Eastern Europe, and Asia. Satellite imagery captured at least 17 distinct growth sites, though public awareness remained minimal due to effective information control. What changed in this cycle was the discovery that the stalks were not merely physical anomalies, but had measurable effects on local electromagnetic fields. Instruments recorded massive energy fluctuations around each growth site. More disturbing were the audio recordings captured near the stalks, low-frequency vibrations that, when analyzed by linguistic experts, revealed patterns consistent with language. Something was communicating. The most recent cycle began in 2014. Despite the digital age's unprecedented information-sharing capabilities, Evidence of new appearances has been remarkably difficult to verify. Videos emerge online only to be debunked as hoaxes or disappear completely from servers. Witnesses report strange men in suits confiscating phones and computers. Drone footage becomes corrupted. Satellite images show curious gaps. What we do know comes from scattered reports and leaked documents. The pattern has accelerated. The 40-year cycle has collapsed to 30 years, then 20. Growth sites have multiplied exponentially, and for the first time, there are verified reports of something descending from above. In 2015, a forest ranger in the Olympic National Park reported finding massive footprints, each nearly 6 feet in length, after a storm that had temporarily obscured the area in dense fog. Plaster casts were made before federal officials arrived and cordoned off the area for what was termed an environmental assessment. The ranger was reassigned to a desk position 3 states away. The footprint casts disappeared from the evidence locker 1 week later. Similar reports have emerged from remote areas in the Carpathian Mountains, the Siberian taiga, and the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Always the same sequence. Unusual meteorological conditions, the brief appearance of vegetative anomalies, followed by evidence of extremely large humanoid presence. Always the same response: government containment, witness relocation, evidence disappearance. In 2017, a group calling themselves The Watchers published an analysis of global weather patterns, population disappearances, and government activity that suggested a coordinated effort to monitor and contain what they termed incursions. Their website existed for 17 days before being removed by unknown entities. The group's members, primarily meteorologists, statisticians, and former military intelligence officers, have since vanished from public records. Their final update included a disturbing correlation between the locations of Beanstalk appearances and subsequent missing persons reports. In areas where growths had been observed, disappearance rates increased by 400% in the following year. Most victims were children between the ages of 8 and 12. The official explanations ranged from runaways to human trafficking, but none of these missing children have ever been found. What connects these disappearances to the original tale? Consider the story's true implications. In most versions, Jack steals from the giant repeatedly, taking gold, a hen that lays golden eggs, and a magical harp. But what if the story was inverted to hide the truth? What if it is we who are being harvested? Ancient folklore across cultures contains references to sky people who descend periodically to take resources, including humans, before returning to their realm above. The Norse spoke of Jotunheim, the land of giants. Greek mythology described the Titans. Native American tribes tell stories of star people who visit Earth to collect specimens. These are not simply cultural parallels, they are records of the same phenomenon interpreted through different cultural lenses. In 2019, Dr. Elizabeth Crane, a cultural anthropologist specializing in folklore, published a comprehensive analysis of giant myths across civilizations. Her work identified 67 distinct cultural traditions with stories matching the Beanstalk pattern, sudden connections between earth and sky, giant beings descending, humans ascending, and never returning. Most critically, she mapped these stories to geographical locations and found they corresponded precisely with documented growth sites from the last 3 centuries. Dr. Crane's research was never formally published. Her university cited methodological concerns, though colleagues reported no issues with her work. Her research materials were confiscated during a burglary at her home. 3 months later, she accepted a research position in Antarctica. No communication has been received from her since. The most disturbing development emerged in 2020, when 3 separate growth sites in remote areas remained undetected by authorities for nearly 72 hours, the longest documented period of stability. Satellite imagery, later leaked by an anonymous source within the European Space Agency, showed distinct architectural structures forming at the top of these stalks, massive complexes that appeared to be extending downward rather than being built upward. At the Wyoming growth site, a group of hikers inadvertently recorded audio of what analysts have identified as movement of extremely large entities. The recording, before it was removed from all platforms, captured heavy footfalls that seismic experts confirmed would correspond to beings at least 60 feet in height and weighing approximately 30 tons. The hikers themselves disappeared, though their equipment was found scattered around the base of where the stalk had been. The truth behind Jack and the Beanstalk is not about magic beans or a clever boy's adventure. It's about cyclical incursions from entities that see our world as we might view a garden, a place to harvest resources, including us. The fairy tale was created as a means of psychological inoculation, a way to ensure that any witnesses to the real phenomenon would be dismissed as having an overactive imagination influenced by children's stories. But the pattern is accelerating. The 40-year cycle has compressed drastically. Calculations based on the increasing frequency suggest the next major incursion will occur not in 2034 as the historical pattern would predict, but much sooner. Possibly within months, possibly now. The most troubling aspect of recent growth sites is their proximity to population centers. While historical appearances were primarily in rural areas, recent manifestations have been documented within 20 miles of major cities. They are getting closer. The strategy is changing. And now I must share the most disturbing discovery of all. The beings above us are aware of our awareness. Leaked documents from within multiple intelligence agencies confirm a coordinated global effort to prevent public recognition of the phenomenon. Not to protect us from panic, but because mass awareness appears to accelerate the cycle. They are watching for those who watch for them. Attention feeds them. Recognition summons them. The more we learn, the closer they come. Think about the story again. Jack plants the beans, climbs the stalk, and steals from the giant. But the giant follows him down. The giant descends to our world. And what does Jack do? He cuts down the beanstalk, trapping the giant here. What if that's not the end of the story? What if that's precisely what they want? Consider this. Every documented growth site has shown evidence of the stalks being deliberately destroyed, burned, cut down, removed, just like in the tale. But what if this destruction doesn't prevent the incursion? What if it completes it? What if, by destroying the stalks, we're not keeping them out but trapping them in? Reports of abnormally large footprints, unexplained structural damage to forests, and livestock mutilations have increased 500% in regions surrounding former growth sites since 2015. Something is already here. Multiple somethings, moving primarily at night, staying to shadowed areas, learning, watching, waiting. There's something else you should know. As I've researched this phenomenon, I've noticed patterns in my own experience that suggest monitoring. Unusual technical difficulties, strange sounds on my phone calls, gaps in surveillance footage around my residence, brief glimpses of extremely tall figures at the periphery of my vision, particularly at dusk. Last week, I found a small green shoot growing through the floorboards of my office. It grew 6 inches between the time I noticed it and when I returned with a camera 30 seconds later. When I tried to remove it, it retracted on its own, pulling back through the floor and leaving no trace, no hole, no mark, nothing to prove it was ever there. I've shared this information because the public deserves to know, but I understand the risk. By the time you're reading this, I may no longer be able to provide updates. If I disappear, it will be attributed to mental health issues or an unannounced vacation, standard procedure. Before I conclude, I should address the skeptics. You may dismiss this as elaborate fiction. That's your right. It might even be safer for you to do so. But ask yourself, why has the story of Jack and the Beanstalk persisted for centuries? Why do governments around the world maintain specialized botanical response units? Why are certain weather patterns immediately followed by communications blackouts in affected areas? Why do search engines automatically redirect queries about unexplained plant growth or giant footprints? The pattern is there for those willing to see it. The 40-year cycle, the disappeared witnesses, the transformed narrative, the increasing frequency. They've been coming here for centuries, taking what they need, and we've been taught to call it a fairy tale. Look up. Notice the unusual cloud formations that linger for days. Pay attention to unexplained seismic events that don't register as earthquakes. Be aware of sudden fog banks that form regardless of weather conditions. These are the signs. They're coming down more frequently now, and I believe they're staying. If you've read this far, you're part of it now. You're watching for them, which means they're watching for you. Remember, attention feeds them. Recognition summons them. Knowledge attracts them. Do you hear that? That low rumble that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once? That's not thunder. That's footsteps. Very, very large footsteps. Getting closer. Sleep well tonight. And perhaps reconsider planting that garden you've been planning. You never know what might grow when you're not looking. What might climb down while you sleep. What might be standing over your bed right now, watching you read these words. They're here. They've always been here. And now they know that you know. If you found this information valuable, share it, but be careful. Use code words, avoid direct references. They're monitoring communications about their presence. If you've experienced anything similar, unusual plant growth, glimpses of impossibly tall figures, unexplained shadows, leave a comment saying simply, "Fee fee fo fum." Those who know will understand. Remember the real moral of Jack and the Beanstalk. Some stories aren't meant to entertain us, they're meant to warn us, and sometimes the giant wins.